The Catholic bishops of the United States gave a large grant to an organization promoting abortion. Again. Coming up in this special report from the Lepanto Institute. At the end of 2020, shortly after the Catholic Campaign for Human Development released its grants list for that year, the Lepanto Institute reported that the CCHD had given $60,000 to an organization called the Ostara Initiative. The problem was that the Ostara Initiative was actively promoting abortion to vulnerable women in prisons. On its projects page, the Ostara Initiative indicates that it operates 3 programs: the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, the Alabama Prison Birth Project, and 8A. On the Minnesota Prison Doula Project website, it clearly indicates that it is a project of the Ostara Initiative and even indicates that the Catholic Campaign for Human Development is among its financial supporters. Simply put, whatever the Minnesota Prison Doula Project does is an official action of the Ostara Initiative, which is funded by the Catholic bishops. In March of 2018, Erica Garrity, the executive director of the Ostara Initiative and co-founder of the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, and Raylene Baker, the project's program coordinator, gave a talk on reproductive justice and the justice system to student advocates for reproductive choice. On Facebook, the student group thanked the Minnesota Prison Doula Project for speaking to them. In this picture, you can see Raylene Baker talking to the students about abortion access for incarcerated people. Carleton College then published an article on the event saying, although the Minnesota Prison Doula Project focuses on pregnancy care, birth, and child care, Erica and Raylene described how, due to the lack of support for abortions within the prison, the doulas have sometimes served as resources for women considering abortion. The article also noted how both Erica and Raylene expressed concern that prisons were reluctant to permit women prisoners to commit abortions, saying this. Erica and Raylene described how, despite the fact that abortion is legal, the prisons are legally required to allow incarcerated women to have them. Many jails and prisons attempt to keep women from getting abortions by ignoring their requests or putting off their appointments until it's too late to have an abortion. Bear in mind that we discovered and reported all of this in November of 2020. In addition to this, we discovered an article published at Feminist Campus saying this. One group that has worked to support incarcerated women seeking access to reproductive health care, including abortion, is the Minnesota Prison Doula Project. Though the work of the doulas was initially focused on prenatal care, birth, and mothering, they have recently aided a few of their clients in accessing abortion care, which demonstrates the group's responsiveness to the needs of the community of women that they serve. On top of all of this, we also found video proof of the Ostara Initiative's Director of Research, Rebecca Schlafer, promoting abortion in a talk that she gave in April of 2018. After being introduced to the audience as co-founder of the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, you'll hear her answering a question about abortion, complaining about the lack of access to abortion for incarcerated women. Listen.
Also joining us this evening is Dr. Rebecca Schlafer. She is an assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Minnesota Medical School. Additionally, she co-founded the Minnesota Prison Doula Project.
I actually have a question about abortions in jails, whether it's accessible at all, whether it's encouraged for financial reasons or not allowed. Can you speak to that?
They don't even mention that there's an option for you to get an abortion. Mm-hmm. So it just really depends on what facility you're at.
Definitely. I had a healthcare provider once say to me that if he heard a woman ask about an abortion, he was trained and told to essentially ignore her questions. So if a woman came into the facility and said, I'd like to know options about terminating my pregnancy, he literally said he would just ignore the question and pretend he didn't hear her. No state dollars can be used, so public funds, the Department of Corrections, county jails can't pay for the termination procedure. And in the state of Minnesota, what that means is that women have been told that if they want to terminate their pregnancies, they will have to pay for not only the procedure, but the transportation to and from the clinic, the wear and tear on the vehicle that will get them there, the officer's time to transport them. And so the financial barriers, particularly for a person who's currently incarcerated, maybe making 25 cents an hour if they've been able to get a job, means that is cost prohibitive. And I think it's this really interesting paradox in terms of not providing women with comprehensive health care to support maternal and child health, and yet not providing them with access to terminate their pregnancies. And so it still boggles my mind, like, well, what's the ideal situation here? We're treating people like crap, and we're not giving them access to terminate their pregnancies when they want to. And that is an ethically complicated situation, but I think I can say hands down that we're not quite doing it anywhere near right now.
Here's one more thing that we reported about the Ostara Initiative in 2020. In 2016, the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, identifying both Erica Garrity and Raylene Baker as authors, published a pregnancy guide for incarcerated mothers. Beginning on page 3, under the heading Top 10 Tips for Making a Healthy Baby, the guide says, Number 10, use birth control until you're ready to start trying. And under that guidance, the booklet then encourages use of condoms, birth control pills, Depo-Provera, and IUDs. Again, we provided all of this information to the USCCB in November of 2020, and yet they gave Ostara another grant anyway, for even more money, $65,000 in fact. In November of 2021, an article appearing in the Catholic Spirit indicates that the Ostara Initiative was one of 4 organizations from the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis that applied for and is already receiving funding for the year 2021 to 2022. It then acknowledges Ostara's work through the Minnesota Prison Doula Project. And with Catholic cash in hand, the Ostara Initiative held a conference in April of 2021 titled Reproductive Injustice, Birth Behind Bars. The 4.5-hour conference gave the definition for reproductive justice several times as the right not to have children, the ability to choose if, how, and when to have children, and autonomy over our own bodies. The conference indicated that women have a constitutional right to abortion and then complained that women lack access to abortions while in prison. Here are a few excerpts from the conference.
Today we come together around reproductive injustice or reproductive justice, the human right to control our sexuality, our gender, our work, and our reproduction. That can only be achieved when all people have the complete economic, social, and political power and resources to make healthy decisions about our bodies, our families, and our communities in all areas of our lives.
And there are four key rights of reproductive justice: the right not to have children, the right to have children and to determine the conditions of birth and family making, the right to bodily autonomy from any form of sexual or reproductive oppression, and the right to parent in a safe and dignified environment and with the necessary social supports. Reproductive justice is also a structural framework. It recognizes that people need the material resources to enact these rights. Our current system of incarceration, it limits people's access to contraception and abortion. We found that there were very few abortions at the prisons. There were only 11 abortions that happened. So that was 1% of all the pregnancies that ended, which is not proportional to what happens in the community. This is why incarcerated people can be denied access to abortion, even though it's clearly been shown that women retain their constitutional right to abortion when they're incarcerated, but because no one's paying attention, anything can happen.
I was arrested and convicted in 97, served a year, and found out I was pregnant. And I had to make a choice whether I wanted to remain pregnant or terminate my pregnancy, go to boot camp, and serve only a year sentence as opposed to 3. So in my mind, I had to choose between my child, who was 3 at the time, and whether I wanted to get home to him sooner, or whether I wanted to have a child in prison and, let my mom raise this child and not be with this human for 2 or 3 more years. So I chose to have an abortion and had to pay for my abortion and, went to Planned Parenthood. And
central to reproductive justice is the ability to make decisions about our own bodies without fear, coercion, or violence. Reproductive justice is a human right that includes the ability to choose if, when, and how to have children and under what circumstances you will be a parent.
So every person in Minnesota deserves to have the basic human right to maintain autonomy over our own bodies, to have or not have children, and to parent the children they have in safe environments.
Here's something else that we discovered recently. In 2014, Erica Garrity and Rebecca Schlaffer, the co-founders of Ostara, helped craft argumentation for permitting abortion access in women's prisons. In a document titled Legislative Committee on the Care of Pregnant Incarcerated Women, a meeting summary identified Garrity and Schlaffer as participants. Under Section 3, Identification of Key Issues, the summary says, therapeutic abortion is not addressed in the legislation, but is a concern for health providers, particularly those in county jails. If an inmate is pregnancy tested and wants to have an abortion, there aren't options for them, and it becomes an uncomfortable situation for the provider. At the state level, Minnesota Department of Correction representatives indicated that if someone wants an elective abortion, medical staff can assist with making an appointment, but the state won't provide the procedure. Brad noted that not providing access may be in violation of the law. And just a few days ago, Schlaffer and Garrity published an analysis of the Justice for Incarcerated Moms Act of 2021, wherein they complained that pregnant people experiencing incarceration have been denied access to their constitutional right to abortion. Now, one of the other rules of the CCHD is that grantees may not be members of coalitions whose actions or agendas include things that conflict with Catholic teaching. In fact, each grantee has to sign this agreement with the CCHD, which says, grantee agrees that it will not knowingly participate in any coalition that has, as part of its organizational purpose or agenda, the promotion of actions in conflict with fundamental Catholic moral or social teaching. In direct violation of this agreement, the Ostara Initiative's Minnesota Prison Doula Project is a member of an organization called Forward Together, which is completely committed to abortion and contraception under the auspices of so-called reproductive justice. Just this year, Forward Together collaborated with 2 other organizations to produce a reproductive healthcare success guide. Displaying a woman with a rosary around her neck on the front cover, the guide is filled with promotion of abortion. But the key portion is on page 8 under the heading, quote, Best Practices in the Community Involvement Process and Assessment. It says, abortion is healthcare. Reproductive healthcare, including abortion care, must be integrated into the greater healthcare system for the health and wellness of people and families, not as a for-profit service or commodity. Here's one from 2020 called We Keep Each Other Safe, in relation to the recent health-related crisis. While opening the discussions on masking and social distancing, this guide made sure to insert a whole portion on abortion, which says, abortion care is an essential part of healthcare and a time-sensitive service. All abortion healthcare workers should still be operating and providing services during the pandemic. Ask about medication abortion at home. Here's one more. In 2017, Forward Together created a reproductive justice media reference guide for reporting on abortion and the Latinx community. In the beginning of this guide, it defines reproductive justice rather close to how Minnesota Prison Doula Project did in their conference. The guide says this: all people having the social, political, and economic power and resources to make healthy decisions about their gender, bodies, sexuality, and families for themselves and their communities. The guide then clarifies by saying, from abortion access to the rights of incarcerated individuals and resources for young families, reproductive justice issues run the gamut. The rest of the guide is focused on how to frame the reproductive justice issue around abortion as a right, but the point is simply this: while the Ostara Initiative is promoting abortion in its own right, it is also collaborating with other organizations that do it as well. You just can't get more direct evidence than what you've seen here. The leaders of the Ostara Initiative, while representing the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, are clearly identified as providing assistance to inmates seeking abortion. In their own statements on video, we have them promoting abortion, and in recent publications, they continue to complain about inmates not being able to have abortions. What further evidence do the bishops need to see that this organization is completely violating Catholic moral teaching and doing it with Catholic funds? The CCHD knew all about what the Ostara Initiative was doing in 2020 when we published our report, and despite that, they have now given them 2 more grants. This is downright despicable, and it's got to stop. The only explanation for this group continuing to receive funds is that the CCHD clearly has no compunction about Catholic moral teaching and doesn't give a rip about its own guidelines. That's why the CCHD has to be shut down permanently. It can't be fixed. It's just got to end. Complicit Clergy has a fantastic resource for finding your bishop's mailing address, phone number, and email address. Just follow the link in the show notes below and send this report to your bishop. Tell him that there is absolutely no excuse for the CCHD to provide 3 annual grants to the Ostara Initiative, especially since they were told about its pro-abortion activities 2 years ago. Ask him to withdraw support from the CCHD and work for it to be closed down once and for all.